What's up guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new, my name's Chris and here we explore products, places, and things that help us live a more enjoyable life. Today I'm gonna run through something that I think is a bit more universal than the bikes that I've done in the past, and that is shoes. I wanna throw out 3 different pairs of shoes that I have found to be absolutely fantastic. We've all been in that place where you've been on a long ride and your feet are just absolutely killing you, whether it's the tops of your feet, the bottoms of your feet. I've been there many, many times and I've wasted way too much money trying different shoes that just frankly didn't really work well and they just hurt my feet after a while. So today I wanna run through 3 different shoes that I think are great. The first one is the Specialized S-Works 7 shoe. The second is the Specialized S-Works Aries shoe. And the third is the Shimano S-Phyre RC902. As with all of these, I offer my perspective as somebody who rides about 7,500 miles a year, who enjoys smashing the pedals with friends and shows up to the occasional race here and there. But the reality is I've still got a 9-to-5 job, I've got a family, and I don't collect a paycheck for riding the bike. So I like to think of all of these as like a conversation with a friend who may be considering a new purchase. In each of these shoes, I've logged thousands of miles. In the S-Works 7 as well as the S-Works Aries, I've ridden over 200 miles in a single day, so about 9.5 hours. In the Shimano S-Phyres, I've had many 8+ hour days, along with just a ton of shorter group rides in each of these shoes. And I really feel like I've put them through the ringer. I've found their breaking points, their weak spots, and I've got one that's a favorite for really long rides. I've got one that's great for all around, and I've got one that's just like my go-to shoe that I use every single day. Let's start with aesthetics and let's talk about the S-Works Aries shoe because I think that's the most polarizing of the bunch. I remember when that first launched, I was riding the S-Works 7 shoe and I looked at the Aries and I thought, wow, that's a bizarre looking shoe. It had a squared off toe box. It almost looked like it had like a toe cap on it. The BOA dials were in a new position and it had what everybody now calls just the mesh sock, which is kind of like this lining underneath of the straps underneath the BOA dials. Everyone questioned at first, like, is this mesh lining sock thing even going to last and why is it even there? So the look is definitely a bit polarizing. Aesthetically, I think the Shimano S-Phyre is just about right. It's a clean looking white shoe. It almost has like a pearl shine to it, especially when they're really clean. It has the same dials as the Aries shoe. They call them like the Li2s. The dial position is a bit more traditional. I guess if there were some gripes that I had about the shoe, the cable routing around the toe is a little bit bizarre, and I don't love that like black heel cup on them. But really, like, those are pretty petty. I think it's a good looking shoe. If you haven't noticed, I'm a sucker for a clean looking shoe. And so for that reason, I think the S-Works 7s are the best looking shoe out of these 3. It's very simple, it's very clean. The cables just kind of go across the tongue. There's no crazy crisscrossing or weird spots on the toe. And I think the graphics are subtle and it just looks really sharp. Plus, I think the BOA dials on these look really, really good. It's kind of like this silver aluminum color. I had swapped mine out at a later date for black. I also thought that looked good. Overall, I think the S-Works 7s are probably a 10 out of 10 when it comes to aesthetics. Aesthetics are cool, but let's talk about ride experience. After logging hundreds of miles in these shoes, I have to say that the S-Phyres are my go-to shoes. Right out of the box, they're incredibly comfortable, they're responsive, they're quick, they're easy to adjust, and they're easy to put on, which after having the Aries shoes is a big relief, and I'll talk about that more later. I bought the wide version of the S-Phyres and I sized up a half size. And it gives me just a little bit more room versus the S-Works 7 shoe and the Aries, and I really like it. I do have to say though, that after riding 8 or 9 hours in these shoes, I did notice and develop hot spots on the tops of my feet, right where the BOA connects to the shoe. So it may just be my foot, it could have just been a long day in the saddle, but it's worth noting that I did get some hot spots with these shoes after a really, really long day. The S-Works 7s are nearly on par with the S-Phyres, only lacking slightly in comfort. And really that boils down to one point, and that is where the BOA crosses the tongue. You see, there's like this small ridge on the S-Works 7 tongue, and the BOA gets caught on the side of the ridge that's closest to your foot and kind of digs into your foot a little bit. So my solution was to cross the BOAs in kind of like an X pattern, and it seemed to solve the problem. I had the same issues with my Recons, but I think it's kind of a flaw in the design of the shoe. Again, maybe it's just my foot shape, but I've also seen a lot of people who cross the BOAs to avoid that same issue. Other than that, these are a really great shoe. I actually prefer the BOA dials on these shoes compared to the other shoes. It's really easy to make micro adjustments. You can adjust on the fly, and it's like a super smooth BOA dial. That's not to say that the other ones aren't, but this one's just exceptionally smooth, which is bizarre to say about something as simple as a boa dial. The Aries shoe, well, the Aries shoe is my favorite for long days in the saddle. See, that sock, mesh, weird web thing that's so polarizing makes this shoe so comfortable. It distributes pressure across the entire top of your foot, eliminating any pain points or hot spots. At least that's been my experience. This last September, I used these shoes in my 200-mile race that I do, and after 9.5 hours in the saddle, usually my feet are completely cooked and I can't wait to get my shoes off. This year they were totally fine. I kept walking around, talking to my friends, congratulating everybody. No big deal at all. I think these are the most comfortable shoes for really long days. The reason the Aries aren't my go-to for everyday riding is because they're kind of a hassle to get on. I said that during the S-Phyre portion of this, and I really mean it. I mean, going from the S-Phyre to the Aries and the Aries to the S-Phyre, there's a really big difference in just simply putting on your shoe. And sure, maybe it's only an extra 30 seconds, but you have to like struggle to get these things on because of the sock and because of the way these are constructed. I joke with friends that you need a shoehorn to get these things on, and that's really not that far from the truth. Now again, this is not like a really big deal. It just adds a little bit of extra time to your morning, but when you're late for a group ride, every second counts. And so to spend an extra 30, 45 seconds putting on your shoes is kind of a pain, and really like it's almost exhausting. And I know that sounds a little bit dramatic, but it is. The other complaint I have about the Aries shoes is that they're pretty hard to clean. See, with the S-Works 7 and the S-Phyres, all I have to do is grab a wet rag with some soap or a magic eraser, and I can quickly clean off my shoes in a couple minutes. With the Aries shoes, I've got to like get under all the different layers, and I've got to clean that mesh sock thing, which always gets dirty because it's white, and they're just kind of a pain to clean. So again, if I'm looking at all these different shoes, that's one little gripe about the Aries. I'd say that all three of these shoes are equally stiff and responsive. There's no real variance here, at least not that I can tell from real world riding. I'm sure you could put them in front of a computer and do some kind of stress test on the soles, and you could say that, hey, this one's a little bit stiffer than that one. I can tell you from real world riding, they all feel just about the same. What I do feel with the S-Phyre is that it holds my foot in a little bit better than the S-Works 7, and of course the Aries really just sucks your foot in because it has that mesh lining sock thing in it. I should probably figure out what that thing's actually called. Either way, I think these shoes are all fantastic when it comes to stiffness and responsiveness. I know the Aries claims to like save you a watt here and there, and that may be the difference between making and breaking a race. I didn't really feel that much faster in the Aries shoe, although I did get on the podium in a race, so maybe it was because of the shoe? Nah, I'm just kidding. When it comes to value, look, all of these shoes are really expensive, and only about $5 separates the S-Works 7 and Aries and the Shimano S-Phyres. So I don't think there's really a value play between these shoes. What I will say is that when it comes to shoes, I believe that you get what you pay for. If you've ever had a lower tier or mid-tier shoe and then tried an upper tier shoe, you can immediately feel the difference. It's stiffer, it's more responsive, and frankly, it's just more comfortable. And that's not to say that everybody needs a top tier shoe, but if you haven't tried what I'd invite you to try one and just kind of feel the difference. In the grand scheme of a cyclist budget, I think investing in a good pair of shoes is a no-brainer. I think the ROI that you get on that is much, much higher than, say, if you were to buy a higher end component group, or you were to buy an S-Works versus a Pro frame, or a higher tier wheel set. I think the ability to have a stiff, responsive, and more than anything, comfortable pair of shoes goes a long, long way. So which shoes am I keeping? Well, since the Aries are custom painted, those are definitely not going anywhere. Thanks, Shane. But for me, my go-to everyday shoe is what I'm going to keep, and that is the S-Phyre. They're just perfect for everyday use. Oh, and then we have the S-Works 7 Lace, which just launched in the last couple weeks. So why didn't I include that in this comparison? Well, because they're really, really new, and I haven't logged enough time in them to give you like a fair comparison versus some of the other shoes. So far, I like them. They feel a lot like the S-Works 7, and they feel a lot like the Recon Laces, which I think is also a great shoe. If you'd like to see a video comparing just the S-Works 7 and the S-Works 7 Lace, drop me a comment or a message on Instagram. and I will see if I can't put something together after I've let these thoughts marinate a little bit. Those are my thoughts on these 3 shoes. And look, there are a ton of really good shoes out there. These are just 3 that I've owned, that I've compared, and I can offer an opinion on. As always, I try to make this kind of like a conversation, as if we were on a group ride and you said, hey Chris, what do you think of those Aries shoes? Or what do you think of those S-Phyre shoes? So I hope it's beneficial. If you have any questions, drop me a comment below or shoot me a message on Instagram. Until then,